For 3 years, I had been leaving fresh flowers at my late mother-in-law's grave every Sunday, a ritual my husband Daniel said meant the world to him. Last week, the groundskeeper pulled me aside and whispered, "Ma'am, I need to show you something. The grave you've been visiting, it's empty. There's something you need to know about your husband." And so when I followed him to the cemetery office, my world began to crack. But before that moment shattered everything, it was just another ordinary Sunday. Sarah Chun stood at the nurse's station, finishing her shift notes. At 42, she still moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent 20 years in the pediatric ward. Her black hair, streaked with premature gray, was pulled back in a practical bun. In the reflection of the computer monitor, she saw a woman who looked tired. Not just end-of-shift tired, but soul-tired. The kind that came from carrying invisible weights no one else could see. "Sarah, you're still here?" Dr. Martinez, the head of pediatrics, called out. "Your shift ended an hour ago." "Just finishing up," Sarah replied with the soft, measured tone she'd perfected over the years. "Tommy in 304 needs his medication schedule adjusted before I go." She signed off on the charts, grabbed her worn leather purse, the one she'd bought at a thrift store 5 years ago, and headed toward the parking lot. Inside her wallet was an envelope containing $150. For some people, that was pocket change. For Sarah, it was the new winter coat she hadn't bought for herself in 4 years. But for the woman she was about to meet, it was survival. Rose Park appeared at the edge of the hospital parking lot, waiting by the old oak tree like she always did on the first Sunday of the month. She was Daniel's mother's former caregiver, a gentle Filipino woman in her 60s who had cared for Eleanor Chun during her final battle with cancer. That was until Daniel came home one evening 3 years ago, loosened his tie with an angry gesture, and said, "I had to let Rose go. She was taking money from Mom's purse. Can't trust anyone these days." Sarah had known it wasn't true. Eleanor had loved Rose. Rose had bathed her, fed her, read to her when the pain was too much for sleep. But Sarah hadn't argued with her husband that day. She rarely argued at all. Instead, she started setting money aside. A little from overtime shifts, a little from skipped lunches, a little from birthday money her own aging father sent her. "Mrs. Chun," Rose called softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Rose, please. It's cold. You should have waited inside." Sarah quickly looked around before pressing the envelope into Rose's weathered hands. Rose's fingers, bent with arthritis, clutched the envelope. Her eyes filled with tears. "You are too good. Your husband, he doesn't know you do this." "No, and it's better that way." Sarah glanced back at the hospital entrance. "Please, Rose. Use it for your medicine. And eat properly. No more skipping meals. If he finds out," Rose whispered, fear flickering across her face. "He won't." Sarah squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." Rose looked at her with eyes that held both gratitude and sorrow. "Mrs. Chun, you are a good woman. Too good for." She stopped herself, biting her lower lip. "For what, Rose?" The older woman shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Nothing. Just you are too good. That is all I mean." She tucked the envelope into her coat pocket. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Sarah watched her walk away, disappearing into the evening shadows. Then she turned toward her car, where the next ritual of her Sunday awaited. The flower shop on Maple Street was still open. Sarah bought a modest bouquet of white chrysanthemums, Eleanor's favorite, just as she had every Sunday for the past 3 years. The young florist knew her by name now. "For Mrs. Chen's grave?" the girl asked, already wrapping the stems in brown paper. "Yes. Thank you, Emma. You're so devoted," Emma said with admiration. "I wish more daughters-in-law were like you." Sarah smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Devoted. That was the word people always used. Devoted wife. Devoted daughter-in-law. Devoted nurse. As if devotion was something to be proud of, rather than a cage built from expectations and fear of disappointment. Greenwood Cemetery was quiet at dusk. The autumn wind scattered leaves across the paths, and the old trees swayed like mourners at an eternal funeral. Sarah walked the familiar route to Eleanor's grave, her footsteps crunching on gravel. The headstone was modest but elegant. Eleanor Marie Chun, beloved mother and grandmother. 1948 to 2021. Below it, someone had carved, "Her kindness touched all who knew her." Sarah knelt down, brushing away dead leaves, and placed the fresh flowers in the built-in vase. She did this every week. Rain or shine. Through her own exhaustion, through flu season, through the times when she could barely afford the flowers. Because Daniel had asked her to. Because it was important to him. Because she was devoted. "Hello, Eleanor," she whispered, as she always did. "I hope you're at peace." She stayed for a few minutes, tidying the area around the grave, pulling a few weeds that had sprouted between the stones. Then she stood, brushed off her knees, and walked back toward her car. That's when she saw him. Mr. Peterson, the head groundskeeper, was standing by the cemetery office, watching her. He was a tall man in his 70s, with kind eyes and hands roughened by decades of outdoor work. When he saw her notice him, he raised a hand, gesturing for her to come over. Sarah's heart skipped. Had she done something wrong? Was she not supposed to pull the weeds? "Mrs. Chun," Mr. Peterson said as she approached. His voice was low, cautious. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about something. It's been weighing on me. Is everything okay? With the grave?" He glanced around, as if checking to make sure they were alone. "Can you come inside for a moment? Please. It's important." Sarah followed him into the small office. It smelled of coffee and old paper. Mr. Peterson closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "Mrs. Chun, I don't know how to say this gently, so I'm just going to say it." He pulled out a large leather-bound ledger and opened it to a marked page. "This is our burial registry. Every plot, every interment is recorded here." Sarah stared at the neat rows of handwritten entries, not understanding. Mr. Peterson pointed to a specific line. "This is Eleanor Chen's plot. Section 7, row 14, plot 23. The one you've been visiting." "Yes," Sarah said slowly. "I know." He looked at her with something like pity. "Mrs. Chun, that grave is empty." The words didn't make sense. Sarah blinked, trying to process them. "What do you mean, empty?" Eleanor Chun was never buried there. The office suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Sarah gripped the edge of the desk. "That's impossible. I've been bringing flowers there for 3 years. There's a headstone. Her name is on it." "The headstone is real," Mr. Peterson said carefully. "But it's just a marker. A memorial. No one is buried beneath it." Sarah's mind raced. "But the funeral. There was a funeral. I was there. We all were. Daniel, his sister Claire, the whole family. We watched them lower the casket." Mr. Peterson shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Chun, I've been working here for 43 years. I was here that day. There was a service, yes. A beautiful service. But when everyone left..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your husband came back alone. He spoke with the director. The casket was never lowered. It was taken away." "Taken where?" "I don't know. But I do know that plot was never opened. The ground has never been disturbed." He turned the ledger toward her. "See, right here. Memorial marker only. No interment. It's in the records." Sarah stared at the words. They blurred together, making no sense. Why would Daniel do that? "That's not for me to say, ma'am." Mr. Peterson's voice was gentle. "But I've seen you come here every Sunday for 3 years. Rain, snow, heat. You're always here. And every time I see you kneeling at that empty grave, talking to someone who isn't there." He stopped, his jaw working with emotion. "It's been eating at me. You deserve to know the truth." Sarah stood up so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. "I need to go. I need to." "Mrs. Chun, wait." Mr. Peterson pulled out a business card from his desk drawer. "This is the funeral home that handled the arrangements. Peterson and Sons. My nephew runs it now. If you want answers, start there. Tell them I sent you." Sarah took the card with trembling fingers. She walked out of the office in a daze, past the rows of graves, past the empty plot she'd been tending for 3 years, and got into her car. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at nothing. The cemetery was closing, the gates would lock soon, but she couldn't make herself turn the key. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Working late tonight. Client meeting ran over. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you." 2 words he typed so easily, so automatically. Sarah looked at the message, then at the business card in her hand. The funeral home was probably closed by now. It was Sunday evening. But tomorrow she would go. She drove home on autopilot. The apartment building loomed against the darkening sky, all gray concrete and small windows. Home. Though lately it had felt less like a home and more like a place where she existed between shifts. Inside, the apartment was dark. Daniel's laptop sat closed on the dining table, his coffee mug still half full beside it. Sarah set down her purse and noticed the flashing light on their answering machine. One new message. She pressed play. Daniel, it's Robert from Henderson Funeral Services. Just following up on the monthly payment. We haven't received this month's installment yet for the storage. Please call us back as soon as possible. Thanks. Storage. Sarah played the message again. And again. Storage for what? Eleanor had been buried 3 years ago. What was being stored? And why was Daniel still making monthly payments? Her hands were shaking as she picked up her phone. She searched for Henderson Funeral Services. It was in the next county, about 40 minutes away. Different from the one that had handled the funeral. Why would Daniel be dealing with 2 funeral homes? Sarah sank onto the couch, her mind spinning. She thought about the funeral 3 years ago. Daniel had been devastated, or at least he'd seemed devastated. He'd cried during the eulogy. He'd held Sarah's hand so tightly during the service that her fingers went numb. He'd been the grieving son, the devoted child saying goodbye to his mother. But now she didn't know what was real. Her phone rang, making her jump. Daniel. Hey, honey, his voice sounded tired. I'm going to be another hour at least. Patterson is being difficult about the contract terms. Sarah closed her eyes. Her voice came out steady, normal. Years of nursing had taught her to stay calm in crisis. Okay. Have you eaten? Grabbed a sandwich. Don't worry about me. A pause. You sound strange. Everything okay? Just tired. Long shift. Well, get some rest. I'll try not to wake you when I come in. Another pause. Sarah? I love you. You know that, right? The words felt like stones. I know. Love you too. She hung up and sat in the darkness, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic. The apartment around her felt like a stranger's home. How many other lies were hidden in these walls? Sarah got up and did something she'd never done before in 15 years of marriage. She opened Daniel's laptop. It was password protected. She tried his birthday. Wrong. She tried Eleanor's birthday. Wrong. She tried their anniversary. The screen unlocked. Their anniversary. The one date he never forgot. The one day each year when he brought her flowers and took her to dinner at the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. The gesture had always seemed romantic. Now it felt like a performance. Sarah navigated to his email, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She felt like a criminal, a betrayer. Good wives didn't snoop. Good wives trusted. But good husbands didn't lie about their mother's burial either. She scrolled through his inbox. Work emails. Spam. Newsletters. Then she saw it. An email from Henderson Funeral Services from 2 weeks ago. Dear Mr. Chin, this is a reminder that your storage contract will expire in 6 months. Please contact us to discuss renewal options or alternative arrangements. Current monthly fee, $850. Total amount due, $5,100. $850 a month. For 3 years. Sarah's mind did the math automatically. Over $30,000. Where had that money come from? They shared a bank account, and she reviewed the statements every month. She'd never seen payments to a funeral home. She clicked on his sent folder and searched for Henderson. Dozens of emails appeared. Her hands shook as she opened them, one by one. 3 years of correspondence. Polite, businesslike. Daniel asking about preservation options. Daniel requesting updates on the condition. Daniel arranging for climate control upgrades. Daniel writing, I'll continue paying whatever it takes. Just keep her safe. Keep her safe. Eleanor wasn't buried. She was being stored. Preserved. But why? Sarah clicked on the attachments in one of the emails. A PDF opened. It was a contract for indefinite remains preservation and storage. The signature at the bottom was Daniel's. The date was 3 days after Eleanor's funeral. But there was another document attached. Sarah opened it. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a death certificate. For Eleanor Marie Chin. But something was wrong with it. The date of death was correct, but the place of death wasn't their city. It was listed as Riverside Medical Center in Carson County, 3 hours away. Sarah had been told Eleanor died at home, peacefully, with Rose beside her. Another lie. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Rose. Mrs. Chin, please forgive me. I should have told you long ago. Can we meet tomorrow? It's important. There are things about Mrs. Eleanor you need to know. Sarah stared at the message. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type a response. Yes. Tomorrow after my shift. 3 p.m. Same place. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room, surrounded by the life she thought she knew. The framed wedding photo on the mantel. The throw pillows she'd chosen. The bookshelf filled with medical textbooks and Daniel's business books, arranged in neat rows. Everything looked normal. But underneath, rot had been spreading for years, and she'd been too devoted, too trusting, too tired to notice. The front door opened. Daniel walked in, loosening his tie, carrying his briefcase. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his hair mussed. "Hey," he said, setting down his things. "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," Sarah replied. Her voice sounded normal to her own ears. "Calm. Steady." He walked over and kissed her forehead. His lips were dry, his skin smelled of coffee and stress. "You work too hard. You should take a day off." "Maybe I will," she said. He smiled at her, that familiar smile she'd fallen in love with 17 years ago. "That's my girl. I'm going to shower and crash. Big day tomorrow." Sarah watched him walk toward the bathroom. This man she'd shared her life with. This man she'd trusted completely. This man who'd been lying to her for 3 years about his own mother's death. She sat on the couch until she heard the shower running. Then she picked up the business card Mr. Peterson had given her and the one she'd found online for Henderson Funeral Services. Tomorrow she would get answers. Tomorrow she would stop being devoted and start demanding the truth. But tonight she sat in the dark and mourned. Not for Eleanor, because she still didn't know if Eleanor was truly dead or what had happened to her. She mourned for herself, for the Sarah who'd believed her husband, who'd spent 3 years bringing flowers to an empty grave, who'd worked overtime to help a woman her husband had fired while he spent thousands on secrets. She mourned for the devoted wife who was about to disappear. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, and felt like she was sleeping next to a stranger. Every small sound he made, every shift in position, made her hyper-aware that she didn't really know this man at all. When her alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., she was already awake. She showered, dressed in her scrubs, and made coffee. Daniel emerged from the bedroom looking rumpled and tired. "Morning," he mumbled, kissing her cheek automatically. "God, I hate Mondays." "Your shirt's in the closet." "The blue one," Sarah said, pouring him coffee. Her voice was mechanical, going through the motions of their morning routine. "You're the best." He grabbed the mug, scrolled through his phone. "I might be late again tonight. The Patterson deal is killing me." "Okay." He looked up at her, frowning slightly. "You sure you're all right? You seem off." Sarah met his eyes. Those brown eyes she'd once thought were honest. "Just tired. Like I said." "Well, try to take it easy today." He gulped his coffee, grabbed his briefcase. "Love you. Love you too." The words felt like ash in her mouth. After Daniel left, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business cards in front of her. Peterson and Sons Funeral Home. Henderson Funeral Services. 2 places that held pieces of a puzzle she was terrified to solve. Her shift at the hospital passed in a blur. She went through the motions, checking vitals, administering medications, comforting frightened children and exhausted parents. But her mind was elsewhere. At 2:30 p.m., she clocked out early, telling Dr. Martinez she had a personal emergency. "Everything okay?" he asked with concern. "I hope so," Sarah replied, and realized she wasn't sure if she was lying. She drove to the park where she'd agreed to meet Rose. The older woman was already there, sitting on a bench, clutching her purse like it was a life preserver. When she saw Sarah approaching, she stood up quickly, her face pale and drawn. "Mrs. Chun, thank you for coming." "Rose, please. Just tell me what you know." Sarah sat down, and Rose settled beside her, trembling slightly. "I should have told you 3 years ago," Rose began, her voice thick with guilt. "But I was scared. Your husband, he scared me. And I needed money for my grandchildren." She took a shaky breath. "Mrs. Eleanor, she didn't die at home like they told you." Sarah's chest tightened. "I know. I saw the death certificate. It said Riverside Medical Center." Rose nodded, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. "Yes, but even that's not the whole truth." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. "Mrs. Eleanor, she gave me this 2 weeks before she died. She made me promise to give it to you if anything strange happened. She said, 'Rose, if Daniel does anything unusual with my funeral, you give this to Sarah. You promise me.'" Sarah took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written on the front in Eleanor's elegant cursive. The seal had never been broken. "Why didn't you give this to me 3 years ago?" "Because I was afraid." Rose's voice cracked. Your husband, he came to me the day after the funeral. He said if I ever contacted you, if I ever talked to you about his mother, he would call immigration on my daughter. My Maria, she was waiting for her papers. He said he would make sure she got deported. Rose covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry. I'm a coward. But my grandchildren, they need their mother. Sarah felt cold fury rising in her chest, but she kept her voice gentle. You're not a coward, Rose. You were protecting your family. I understand. Your husband is not a good man, Mrs. Chen. He is very good at seeming good. But Mrs. Eleanor, she knew. In the end, she knew. Sarah carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor's death, and a small key taped to the bottom of the page. She unfolded the letter and began to read. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and something has happened that has made Rose brave enough to break her promise to Daniel. I pray that's the case, because you need to know the truth. I am not dying of cancer, as Daniel has told you and everyone else. I am dying of kidney failure, brought on by deliberate poisoning. I know this because I had my blood tested at a hospital 3 hours away, where Daniel doesn't know the doctors. Small doses of antifreeze, administered over months. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to destroy my kidneys slowly. Sarah's vision blurred. She had to stop reading, had to breathe, had to process the words that couldn't possibly be real. Keep reading, Rose whispered. Please. She wanted you to know. I discovered what Daniel was doing 2 months ago when I found the empty bottle hidden in the garage. I confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it. He told me I was going to die anyway. Why not speed things along? The insurance money, he said. He needed the insurance money. He has debts, Sarah. Gambling debts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's been stealing from his company, and he needs my life insurance payout to cover it before anyone finds out. I went to the police, but Daniel is clever. He moved the bottle. He cleaned everything. And I'm just a dying old woman. They thought I was confused, paranoid from pain medication. So I did the only thing I could do. I changed my beneficiary. The $500,000 policy no longer goes to Daniel. It goes to you, Sarah. And I made sure that my body would be preserved and stored, not buried or cremated, in case someday the truth needs to be proven. I've arranged everything with Henderson Funeral Services. They know to preserve tissue samples. They know to keep detailed records. The key attached to this letter opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 482. Inside, you'll find my medical records, the lab results showing the poisoning, and documents proving Daniel's debts and his theft from his company. Sarah, my dear girl, you have always been too kind, too trusting. Daniel chose you because of that. He needed someone who wouldn't ask questions, who would believe his lies, who would be so busy being devoted that she wouldn't notice what was happening right in front of her. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't see what my son had become until it was too late. But I can protect you now. Take these documents. Expose him. Save yourself before he destroys you too. You are stronger than you know. You are worth more than his lies. And you deserve a life that isn't built on someone else's grave. With all my love, Eleanor. Sarah's hands were shaking so violently that the paper rattled. Rose put an arm around her shoulders. I saw him do it, Rose whispered. The drinks he would make for her. Special smoothies, he called them. For her health. Mrs. Eleanor, she started getting sick after he moved back home to take care of her. Before that, she was weak but stable. Then suddenly, everything got worse. Why did she drink them? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. If she knew. Because she was dying anyway, Rose said simply. The damage was already done. And she needed time. Time to arrange everything, to leave you this letter, to make sure you would be safe. She squeezed Sarah's shoulder. Mrs. Eleanor loved you more than her own son. She told me that. She said you were the daughter she wished she'd had. Sarah folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope along with the key. Her mind was working now, cutting through the shock with the same clinical precision she used in the hospital during emergencies. Step by step. One thing at a time. Rose, I need you to do something for me. Anything, Mrs. Chun. Write down everything you remember. Dates times what you saw. Everything Daniel said to you. Everything Eleanor told you. Can you do that? Rose nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes, I will. And Rose, thank you. Thank you for finally telling me. I know it wasn't easy. The older woman's face crumpled. I should have been braver sooner. Maybe we could have saved her. Maybe, Sarah said quietly. Or maybe Daniel would have hurt you too. Eleanor made her choice. She used the time she had left to protect me. Now I'm going to make sure her sacrifice wasn't for nothing. After Rose left, Sarah sat alone on the bench. The autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the park. Children were playing on the swings, their laughter carrying on the wind. Normal life continuing while hers fell apart. She looked at the key in her hand. Small, silver, ordinary. The key to her mother-in-law's final act of love. The key to her husband's destruction. Sarah had spent years being devoted. Devoted wife. Devoted nurse. Devoted daughter-in-law, bringing flowers to an empty grave. But devotion to a lie wasn't devotion at all. It was just another word for blindness. She stood up, dropped the key into her purse, and walked to her car. She had 2 stops to make. First, the bank to open the safety deposit box. Then Henderson Funeral Services to understand exactly what Daniel had paid $30,000 to hide. And after that, she would go home and look her husband in the eye and see the monster that Eleanor had seen. The man who had poisoned his own mother for insurance money. The man who had manipulated his wife for 15 years. The man who thought he could get away with murder. But Eleanor had made sure he wouldn't. And Sarah would make sure Eleanor's voice, silenced in life, would finally be heard. First National Bank was closing in 20 minutes when Sarah arrived. She walked to the counter with Eleanor's key clutched in her hand, trying to keep her face composed even though everything inside her was screaming. "I need to access a safety deposit box," she told the young teller. "Box 482. The woman typed into her computer, then frowned slightly. "I'll need to see identification and verify you're an authorized user." Sarah slid her driver's license across the counter, her heart pounding. What if Eleanor hadn't been able to add her? What if Daniel had somehow found out and blocked her access? The teller typed again, and her expression cleared. "Okay, Mrs. Chun, you're listed here. Let me get someone to take you to the vault." 5 minutes later, Sarah sat alone in a small private room with a long metal box in front of her. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key and opened it. Inside was a thick manila folder, a smaller locked box, and a USB drive taped to a handwritten note. Eleanor's writing again. "The USB has copies of everything. Keep it somewhere safe. Somewhere he would never look." Sarah opened the folder first. Medical records from Riverside Medical Center. Lab results showing elevated levels of ethylene glycol in Eleanor's blood. A toxicology report that clearly stated, consistent with antifreeze poisoning. Letters from a doctor Sarah had never heard of, Dr. Patricia Hoffman, documenting Eleanor's suspicions and the timeline of her symptoms. Then came the financial documents. Printouts of Daniel's credit card statements showing charges to casinos, online gambling sites, luxury purchases. Bank statements showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. And most damning of all, a letter from his company's accounting department dated 2 months before Eleanor's death, asking Daniel to explain discrepancies in client account reconciliations totaling $340,000. The smaller locked box contained a vial. Sarah recognized it immediately from her nursing training. A tissue sample, properly preserved, labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. Kidney tissue taken during biopsy, August 15, 2021. Contains evidence of toxic exposure. Eleanor had thought of everything. She'd built an airtight case from her deathbed, piece by piece, while her own son was killing her. Sarah photographed every document with her phone, then carefully put everything back in the box except the USB drive, which she slipped into her bra. The safest place she could think of. Then she returned the safety deposit box to the vault attendant. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Of course, Mrs. Chun. Have a good evening." "A good evening." Sarah almost laughed. Instead, she walked out into the fading daylight and got into her car. Henderson Funeral Services was 40 minutes away. Sarah drove in silence, her mind replaying every moment of the last 3 years. Every time Daniel had come home late. Every time he'd been short with her, impatient, distant. Every time he'd suggested she work more overtime, take extra shifts. Keeping her busy. Keeping her tired. Keeping her from noticing. The funeral home was a low, modern building set back from the road. Professional, discreet, expensive-looking. Sarah parked and walked inside, where a middle-aged woman in a black suit greeted her from behind a polished desk. "Good evening. How can I help you? My name is Sarah Chun. I'm here about Eleanor Chun. I believe you've been storing her remains." The woman's professional smile faltered slightly. "Oh, yes. Let me get Mr. Henderson. Please have a seat." Sarah sat in one of the plush chairs, surrounded by silk flowers and soft lighting designed to comfort the grieving. But she wasn't grieving. She was burning. Mr. Henderson appeared, a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Mrs. Chun, I've been wondering when we might meet you. Please come to my office." They walked down a quiet hallway to a book-lined office. Mr. Henderson closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit. "Your mother-in-law was a remarkable woman," he began. "She came to us 3 years ago with very specific requests. She explained that she wanted her body preserved indefinitely for potential forensic examination. She paid in advance for the first year and arranged for her son to make monthly payments thereafter." "Did she tell you why?" Mr. Henderson folded his hands on his desk. "She said she had reason to believe her death would be unnatural, and that someday someone might need proof of that." He paused. "Mrs. Chun, I want you to know that we documented everything. We took extensive photographs during the preparation. We preserved multiple tissue samples beyond what she provided. And we've kept meticulous records of our interactions with your husband." "What kind of interactions?" "He calls every month. Always the same questions. Is the body secure? Is the temperature stable? Has anyone else asked about it? He's very concerned that the preservation continues, but he never asks to see her. In 3 years, he's never once visited. Because he's afraid," Sarah said quietly. "He's afraid of what her body could prove." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "Mrs. Chun, I'm not a police officer, and I'm not a judge. But your mother-in-law trusted me with her final wishes, and she made me promise something. She said if you ever came here asking questions, I was to give you this." He opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, thicker than the first one. "She recorded a video message. It's on this USB drive. She made it 2 days before she died. She wanted you to hear her voice in case you didn't believe the written words." Sarah took the drive with numb fingers. "Can I watch it here?" "Of course." Mr. Henderson left her alone in his office. Sarah plugged the drive into his computer. The screen flickered, and then Eleanor appeared, sitting in what looked like a hospital room. She was thin, pale, connected to Infor. But her eyes were clear and fierce. "Sarah, my dear girl." Eleanor's voice was weak but steady. "If you're watching this, then you know the truth. My son, my Daniel, has poisoned me. He's going to kill me for insurance money. And I've let him, because stopping him would mean police, trials, publicity. It would mean destroying you in the process, and I couldn't do that to you." On the screen, Eleanor shifted in her bed, wincing with pain. "You're probably angry with me right now. Angry that I didn't fight harder, didn't report him, didn't save myself. But Sarah, I am 73 years old. I've lived a full life. You're only 42. You have so many years ahead of you. And if Daniel gets away with killing me, he won't stop. He'll use you until you have nothing left to give, and then he'll destroy you too." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Eleanor reached toward the camera, as if she could touch Sarah through the screen. "I've given you all the evidence you need. Take it to the police. Let them exhume my body and test it. Let them see what he did. And Sarah, don't feel guilty. Don't blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. Daniel is very good at what he does. He's had years of practice lying, manipulating, hiding his true nature. You're not stupid or blind. You're just human, and you trusted someone you thought you loved." Eleanor coughed, the sound wet and painful. "I'm tired now. So very tired. But I'm not afraid. I know that in the end, truth will win. Because I'm making sure it does. I love you, Sarah. You were the best thing that ever happened to this family. Now go be the best thing that happens to yourself." The screen went dark. Sarah sat in the silence of Mr. Henderson's office, tears dripping onto her scrubs. She cried for Eleanor, who had died alone and poisoned, who had used her last days to protect someone else. She cried for herself, for the years she'd wasted, for the love she'd given to someone who'd never deserved it. But underneath the grief, something else was growing. Something hard and bright and unstoppable. Rage. Purpose. Determination. She wiped her eyes, removed the USB drive, and stood up. Mr. Henderson was waiting in the hallway. "Thank you," Sarah told him. "For everything. For honoring her wishes." "What will you do now?" he asked gently. "What she wanted me to do. Tell the truth." She drove home as the sun set completely, plunging the city into darkness. Daniel's car was already in the driveway. He was home early for once. Sarah parked beside him and sat for a moment, gathering her strength. Then she got out, walked to the front door, and stepped inside. Daniel was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the apartment. He turned when he heard her, smiling. "Hey, I'm making your favorite. Spaghetti carbonara. Thought we could have a nice dinner together for once." He walked over and kissed her cheek. "How was your day?" Sarah set down her purse slowly. She looked at this man, this stranger wearing her husband's face. It was enlightening. Something flickered in his eyes. "Yeah. How so?" "I went to see Rose today." Daniel's hand tightened on the wooden spoon. "Rose? Why would you do that?" "Because she had something to give me. From your mother." The color drained from Daniel's face. The spoon clattered to the floor, splattering red sauce across the white tile like blood. "Sarah, I can explain. Can you explain why your mother isn't buried? Why her body has been in storage for 3 years at Henderson Funeral Services?" She wanted it that way. She had specific wishes." "Can you explain the antifreeze poisoning?" Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Daniel's face went from pale to gray. "Can you explain the $340,000 you embezzled from your company? The gambling debts? The reason you needed your mother's life insurance money so desperately that you murdered her for it? You don't understand." His voice came out strangled, desperate. "I was going to pay it back. I had a system. I just needed time. Mom was dying anyway. The cancer. She didn't have cancer." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "You poisoned her. You gave her antifreeze in her smoothies and watched her die slowly, painfully, while I brought flowers to an empty grave and trusted every lie that came out of your mouth." Daniel's legs seemed to give out. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "Sarah, please. Please, you have to understand. I didn't have a choice. They were going to kill me. The people I owed money to, they were going to kill me. So you killed your mother instead." "It wasn't like that." He looked up at her, and now he was crying. Real tears, or fake ones, Sarah could no longer tell. "I loved her. I never wanted to hurt her. But I was desperate. And she was old. She was going to die soon anyway. She was 73. She could have had 10 more years. Sarah, please." He stood up, reaching for her hands. She jerked away. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can leave, start over somewhere else. South America, maybe, or Asia. Somewhere they won't find us. I still have some money hidden. We can disappear." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "You think I'm going to run away with you? You think I'm going to help you escape justice for murdering your mother? She wanted you to have the insurance money." Daniel's voice rose, desperate now. "She changed the beneficiary to you. That's $500,000, Sarah. We could live well on that. We could be happy. I don't want blood money." "Then what do you want?" He was shouting now, the mask finally slipping completely. "You want to destroy me? You want to put me in prison? After everything I've given you? This apartment, this life, 15 years of marriage. You gave me 15 years of lies." Sarah shouted back. "You used me. You manipulated me. You kept me so busy and tired that I wouldn't notice what you were doing. You fired Rose and threatened her family, so she couldn't tell me the truth. You made me mourn at an empty grave while you paid to keep your crime hidden. You're not a husband. You're a monster." Daniel's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful." He lunged toward her. Sarah had already pulled out her phone. "Don't touch me. I'm recording everything. And I've already emailed copies of all the evidence to 3 different people, including my lawyer. If anything happens to me, they'll know exactly who to blame." It was a bluff. She didn't have a lawyer. But Daniel didn't know that. He stopped, breathing hard, his fists clenched. For a moment, Sarah saw something terrifying in his eyes. Then he seemed to deflate, the rage draining out of him. "Sarah, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'm your husband." "No," Sarah said quietly. "You're not. You stopped being my husband the moment you decided your mother's life was worth less than your debts. You stopped being my husband every time you lied to me. You stopped being my husband the moment I understood what you really are." She walked past him, into the bedroom, and pulled out a suitcase. Daniel followed her, still pleading. "Where are you going? You can't just leave. Watch me. You have nowhere to go. No money, no one. I have Eleanor's insurance money. The money you killed her for. The money she left to me because she knew I'd need it to rebuild my life after you destroyed it." Sarah threw clothes into the suitcase. "And I have her evidence. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the police. I'm going to show them everything. The medical records. The toxicology reports. The tissue samples. Your financial records. Eleanor's video. All of it. They won't believe you. I'm a respected businessman. You're just a nurse. Sarah zipped the suitcase and looked at him. Eleanor was just a sick old woman. But she was smart enough to make sure you'd pay for what you did. She built a case that even the best lawyer in the world can't defend against. You're going to prison, Daniel. And I'm going to be free. She walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, out of the life she'd built with a man who'd never deserved her. Daniel didn't follow. Sarah drove to a hotel near the hospital. A modest place, clean and anonymous. She checked in, carried her suitcase to a small room on the 3rd floor, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving her hollow and shaking. She'd done it. She'd confronted him. She'd walked away. But the hardest part was still ahead. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Sarah, please. Come home. We can talk about this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. She blocked his number. Another text came through from an unknown number. This is Rose. Are you safe? I've been praying for you. Sarah typed back. I'm safe. Thank you, Rose. For everything. She didn't sleep that night. She sat up reviewing the evidence on her laptop, making sure everything was organized, clear, undeniable. At dawn, she showered, put on her most professional clothes, and drove to the police station. Detective Maria Rodriguez listened to Sarah's story for 2 hours. She watched Eleanor's video. She reviewed the medical records, the toxicology reports, the financial documents. Her expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. Mrs. Chun, she finally said, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've ever seen. Your mother-in-law was extremely thorough. She wanted to make sure he couldn't get away with it. He won't. Detective Rodriguez stood up. I'm going to need you to give a formal statement, and we'll need to get a court order to examine the preserved remains. But based on what you've shown me, we have more than enough for an arrest warrant. 3 hours later, while Sarah sat in a witness room drinking bad coffee, Detective Rodriguez returned. We picked him up at his office. He's being processed now. Sarah nodded numbly. It was real. It was actually happening. Mrs. Chun, I need to ask you something. Why did you wait? You found out yesterday. You could have come to us immediately. Sarah looked down at her hands. Because I needed one night. One night to look him in the eye and tell him I knew. That I wasn't the blind, devoted fool he thought I was. That Eleanor had won. She met the detective's gaze. Does that make me a bad person? No, Rodriguez said quietly. It makes you human. The trial took 8 months. Daniel hired expensive lawyers who tried every defense they could think of. They argued contamination of evidence. They questioned Eleanor's mental state. They painted Sarah as a bitter wife seeking revenge. They tried to suppress the video, claiming it was manipulated. None of it worked. The toxicology evidence was irrefutable. Eleanor's preserved tissue showed clear signs of antifreeze poisoning. The financial records proved Daniel's motive. Rose testified about the smoothies she'd seen him make. Mr. Henderson testified about Daniel's suspicious behavior and his obsessive calls about the storage. And then the prosecution played Eleanor's video for the jury. The courtroom was silent except for Eleanor's weak but steady voice explaining how her own son had murdered her. Several jurors were crying by the end. The verdict came back in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder. Embezzlement. Insurance fraud. The judge sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah sat in the courtroom gallery and felt nothing. Not triumph. Not relief. Just a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. It was over. Finally, it was over. After the sentencing, Detective Rodriguez found her in the hallway. How are you holding up? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. I thought I'd feel something. Victory, maybe. Or closure. But I just feel empty. That's normal. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that it's done, your body and mind need time to process everything. Rodriguez squeezed her shoulder. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. You honored your mother-in-law's sacrifice. And you saved yourself. Sarah nodded. Thank you. For believing me. For taking this seriously. Thank Eleanor. She made it impossible not to. 6 months after the trial, Sarah stood in front of a real grave. Eleanor's body had finally been laid to rest in Greenwood Cemetery, in the plot that had held only a marker for 3 years. The headstone now read, Eleanor Marie Chun. Truth teller. Protector. Free at last. Sarah placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in the vase. Real flowers for a real grave, for a woman who had saved her life from beyond death. Thank you, Sarah whispered. For everything. For seeing what I couldn't see. For protecting me when I didn't know I needed protection. For being braver than I ever was. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and earth. I'm okay now, Sarah continued. I sold the apartment. Too many ghosts. I'm renting a little cottage near the hospital. It has a garden. I'm learning to grow vegetables. Tomatoes, mostly. They're harder than I expected, but I'm figuring it out. She smiled slightly. Rose comes by every week. We have tea. She's teaching me to make her grandmother's lumpia. I'm terrible at it, but she's patient. And her daughter Maria got her citizenship. She brought her children by last week. They're beautiful, Eleanor. You would have loved them. Sarah knelt down, brushing away a few leaves that had fallen on the grave. The insurance money. I used some of it to start a foundation in your name. It helps families who are dealing with elder abuse. And I'm going back to school. Forensic nursing. I want to help other people recognize the signs I missed. I want to make sure other victims get the justice you had to fight so hard for. She stood up, wrapping her coat tighter against the November chill. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. The devoted wife who brought flowers to an empty grave. That woman died the day I learned the truth. But someone new is growing in her place. Someone stronger. Someone who asks questions. Someone who trusts herself. Sarah touched the cold marble of the headstone. You gave me a second chance at life, Eleanor. I promise I won't waste it. She walked back to her car, past rows of graves holding stories of loss and love and betrayal and redemption. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Martinez. Sarah, the board approved your forensic nursing program proposal. We start training next month. Congratulations. She smiled. A real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. As she drove away from the cemetery, Sarah thought about devotion. For years, she'd believed that devotion meant sacrifice. Giving endlessly. Trusting blindly. Serving without question. But Eleanor had taught her something different. Real devotion wasn't about losing yourself in someone else. It was about being devoted to the truth, even when the truth was painful. Being devoted to yourself, to your own worth, to your own right to live a life built on honesty rather than lies. Sarah had spent 3 years bringing flowers to an empty grave, mourning a woman who wasn't dead yet, married to a man who was already a ghost. But now Eleanor was finally at rest. Daniel was in prison where he belonged. And Sarah was finally truly alive. She drove through the city as streetlights flickered on, heading toward her little cottage with its struggling tomato plants and its rooms that held no memories of betrayal. Heading toward a future that was uncertain and sometimes lonely, but entirely her own. The devoted wife was gone. But the woman who remained was someone Eleanor would have been proud of. Someone Sarah was learning to be proud of too. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying. It's having the courage to leave. Eleanor Chen spent her final days building a bridge to the truth, knowing she'd never cross it herself. But she made sure someone else could. Someone she loved more than her own son. Someone who deserved better than a life built on lies. If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your own life, trust that feeling. Investigate. Ask questions. The truth may hurt, but lies will destroy you slowly, quietly, until there's nothing left. You are not being paranoid. You are not being ungrateful. You are being wise. And remember, devotion should never cost you your dignity, your safety, or your truth. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And never, ever ignore the whispers that tell you something isn't right. Because sometimes, those whispers are trying to save your life.